Human growth hormone. I'm going to be very serious with you in this video. I'm going to tell you what works, what doesn't work, and the extent to which what works and doesn't work. You have to learn 4 things to effectively optimize your human growth hormone if you want to grow taller or if you want to have bigger muscle mass without having to rely completely on testosterone. So, number 1, growth hormone is secreted by the anterior pituitary and it is not mediated by a negative feedback loop. Meaning that if you have more growth hormone, your body is not gonna stop you from having more growth hormone like testosterone would stop you. If you had way too much testosterone, then you wouldn't secrete more testosterone. So if you optimize your growth hormone, then you won't have problems that your growth hormone will end up being lower. That's only other hormones like testosterone and other anterior pituitary hormones as well. Its major role is for protein synthesis and bone elongation, especially during the period of your life, like puberty, where you're experiencing massive growth, so heightened levels of growth hormone, and your growth plates in your bones have not fused. The truth is, and not everybody is going to want to hear this, the truth is after your growth plates have closed, there's very little you can actually do to your height. Now, you never actually know when your growth plates are closed. Some doctors you can tell like by taking x-rays of your hands and such, but the truth is you really never know as an average person. What you can really do is do your best to optimize growth hormone in your life. How do you actually go about doing that? Not only does it target most of the body's cells, but because it targets most of the body's cells, this is good for recovery, for your like joints and your cartilage and all your things. So increasing HGH. Most of your HGH is actually secreted within the first hour of sleep, meaning that it is regulated by your circadian rhythm. It's important to understand that going to bed at the same times every day, even if you sleep little, is better for your hormones, and you will end up feeling better even if you sleep 5 hours at the same time every day, going to bed at 9 p.m. or 8 p.m., 2 a.m. If you just get there at the very same time every day within like a 15-minute window, your hormones will be in check, especially growth hormone, because it is secreted in the first hour of the day, of your sleep, first hour of your sleep. So the way that you can actually optimize your circadian rhythm to actually go to sleep and then specifically secrete that much growth hormone when you're serious about increasing your growth hormone is to go to bed at the same time every day and to wake up at the same time every day, specifically going to bed at the same time, but also get morning sunlight because it shows your brain that, okay, this is the time to actually wake up. And evening sunlight, like the sun going down, actually helps you wind down also and relax when you're going to bed. Other thing is suppression and insulin. If you eat right before bed, insulin can actually suppress HGH, meaning that if you have your biggest meal, and I am honestly a victim or a culprit of this, if you have your biggest meal very, very soon before you actually go to bed, not only because there will be more blood in your gut that prevents you from getting more blood to your brain and actually having a more soothing sleep, not only that, but, I mean, personally, I can sleep like a baby when I eat a bunch, but insulin actually can suppress human growth hormone and also, yeah, just through that aspect, especially when you take into account insulin growth factor. High intensity endurance training. So when people talk about sprinting, it actually does increase growth hormone, but it does it in an acute response, meaning that it very much secretes growth hormone very, very rapidly, but it's very short period of time. The way you can actually increase the amount of growth hormone that is actually secreted when you go through these intense endurance trainings, anything that gets your body really like knowing that it needs to adapt, because if it's not pushing you, then your body, why does it need to secrete more growth hormone? Because the reason it does is because it needs to undergo adaptation. You need to be bigger to adapt to the circumstances of your environment. That's why our hormones exist, for homeostasis of environment, for adaptation, for survival. If you want your HGH to actually increase and not fully go down as fast, and so you can get more reaping of benefits, don't have cold And what I mean by that is some people like to have a cold shower after training because it can, they've heard that it helps with recovery. The truth is that it helps you deal with more, but it doesn't actually make your recovery better. It actually can blunt the HGH surge because your body is recovered, so it doesn't need to adapt as much, if that makes sense. One way that you can do this, I personally found my greatest improvements with I guess growth, specifically like density and physically. We'll talk about more of that with Wolf's Law. When I was doing Muay Thai, combat sports, is very, very intense. But the way you can do this if you don't do combat sports that are very intense is you can do the Sprint 8 method. It's like a 3-minute warm-up followed by a minute and 30-second sprints, and then, a minute and 30-second sprints. I need to make sure, actually. I haven't done this one in a while, but yeah, let's see. 30-second sprints, and then a minute and 30-second recovery time. My apologies. And then you can have a 2.5 minute cool down. It should take around like 20 minutes if you're doing it effectively. Heat exposure, such as saunas, can actually increase growth hormone as well. The thing is, you need to make sure to have an ice pack for your balls, because testosterone, you need to also be careful with your testosterone, because if you're not, your testicles only work in a certain range, about 2 to 3 degrees lower than actual body weight. If you're increasing the temperature of your entire body, you're basically frying your nuts. So not only because, and remember, this is for the high intensity endurance aspect. If your body feels something where it needs to adapt and it needs to be bigger and stronger to adapt to the environment, again, like having intense heat, then it will need to undergo more secretion of growth hormone. So you can just go to the sauna for like 30 minutes and just enjoy yourself there. Just remember to bring an ice bag. Then you have fasting. Again, with this idea of pushing your body through its limits. Fasting is something you can do to increase growth hormone, actually an incredible amount, like very much substantially. 24 hours of fasting will lead to a 500% increase of growth hormone. 3 days, 300%, so it's less. And then a full week will be greater than 1,000. I think it was like 1,250% increase in growth hormone. The problem with this, and again, I told you I was going to be blunt with this, is that if you're fasting, you're not getting nutrients to actually build your body. And so you might not be able to grow as much because you're not eating. Because you need the building blocks for your body. This HGH is to account for you not being able to have food and nutrition. Some people may be able to deal with this a lot better, but some people also will not be able to grow as much. Personally, with my own anecdotal evidence, I found that when I was in high school that I wouldn't eat much because I would not pack a lunch, even though I could have, I just decided to thug it out until like the end of the day. Now, what I noticed is that, I was kind of hungry. I was in this meditative state. It was like an unintentional intermittent fast. And so I would be going through most of the day, not eating anything. And then I'd come back at home like 4 p.m. and then I'd actually eat something. And I broke the fast. And of course, I'm very insulin sensitive. Of course, I need to secrete a little bit more growth hormone because I've been fasting for quite a while. That's coming up close to the 24-hour if you account for sleep. And so that's the 500% that also can help you build more muscle mass, become thicker, become taller. Then we go to nutrition. Like, you need nutrition, but then there's also supplements. Supplementing with arginine is pretty cool, because if you supplement from 15 to 20 grams before bed, you can experience a 60% increase in growth hormone. Again, if you sleep at the specific same time every day. You also have an even greater increase with glutamine. Glutamine is more 78% increase, which is pretty incredible. That's pretty substantial. Now I want to break down a couple myths. So I've given you a bunch of these tips for you optimizing your growth hormone. Now I need to debunk a couple things. So recently there's been kind of like a trend with doing Masai jumps. The interesting thing is that it's in the wording. It's meant to increase height, but the idea is like you just like freaking jump and like your bones have to like minimal knee bend. It's meant to go through the process of Wolff's Law. Now, there's a lot of nuanced things to do with that. First, we'll talk about Wolff's Law. Wolff's Law states that bones under pressure will expand to deal with the pressure. Again, that form of adaptation to account for the environment. The problem is number one, if your growth plates have closed, you're just going to end up growing thicker and I guess bigger, denser bones, but you might not get taller. Again, elongation is different than thickening. When you account for Masai jumps, the rationale is that the pressure that you're going from jumping up and down repeatedly and the combination of the slight intensity, even though it's not high intensity, so it's not going to help that much. The rationale is that your bones will undergo the principles of Wolff's Law and expand, elongate. The problem is that it's in the wording. When you search up Masai jumps for increasing height, it's talking about your jump, your vertical. It increases the height of your vertical, not the height of your body. And that is the honest truth in Masai jumps. And again, a lot of these things, like high intensity things that go for your environment, are acute stresses, acute increases in growth hormone. So I'm just being blunt and serious. You can increase your growth hormone like these, challenging your body. It's just important to realize that you need to let the adaptation catch up, and also it might be a little bit, but if you do all these things at once, it can a little bit adds up into a lot if you're being very, very serious about this, and of course taking your nutrition very seriously and doing that stuff. But I want to warn you, for the very last thing, acromegaly. What is that? It's essentially starting to look a little bit more like an ogre. So at a point when your growth plates have fused, if you are not growing taller, you're growing wider, because growth hormone will make you grow in any way it can. If you can't grow up, you will grow out. So I'll put up a picture. This is what acromegaly looks like. You'll see the bones in the face, the bones in the hands, everything just becomes bigger. And if you do not optimize your growth hormone in a way that you're doing this correctly, then you can get like a giant kind of, but kind of width-wise, kind of like Shrek, if you were to think about it like that. The other thing is HGH injections. People like Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan, he takes HGH injections, and then he gets this thing called GH gut. Because you're growing, it's growth hormone, and it targets every cell in the body, most body cells. That also means your organs. This is why I prefer optimizing testosterone, because it helps with bone density, because it helps with muscle mass. And it's essentially what growth hormone will do, minus the, like for muscle when your growth plates have closed, minus the problems of like GH gut. So Joe Rogan has a little bit of a gut when it comes to that. And real quickly, I want to tell you, if you want to optimize your human performance and hormones, I have a link in the description for my community where we do all about that. And my entire channel is about that. So I want to ask you to consider subscribing. And yeah, that was human growth hormone. I'm sure this helped you. Leave a like, bro.